Greetings, Gus T Renegade, and for another program, Context of White Supremacy. Slight technical difficulty, that was my fault. Thank you all for tuning into the program. Hopefully we'll have constructive information about racism to help us establish justice as soon as possible. Our guest for today's program, we've had, I guess at this point, several programs dealing with eugenics. And I hope people are a little more informed, and more than, I guess, anything, I hope people understand why I feel this is a real important subject matter, that if you're going to look at racism, you should have some understanding of eugenics, what that means, and how that continues to have an impact on the way we think and speak, particularly in this area of the world. Our guest today, author a really informative book, just lots of information about the history and evolution of so-called eugenics and how this way of thinking still has a lasting impact on the way people think today. Hopefully he'll have a lot of good information he can share with us from his book and his studies. Our guest today's program, he is the Stanley Woodward Professor of History at Yale University. He is the author of In the Name of Eugenics, as well as other books, but we're focusing today on In the Name of Eugenics. Our guest for today's program, Dr. Daniel Kevles. Dr. Kevles, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Gus. Good to be with you.
Outstanding. Could you share with our listeners, folks who might not have read your work or be familiar with you, could you give them a little bit about yourself?
Yes. I'm a professor of history at Yale, as you said. I work in the history of science and technology and how they intersect with history of the United States, and I deal with both subjects in the past and also contemporary subjects in historical perspective.
Okay. Excuse me. Before we hop into your book, I want to double check. I feel this is important on the program. You are a white male, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. This program, the C.O.W.S, Context of White Supremacy, I have unfortunately concluded that we are in a global system of racism, white supremacy, and the definition that I use for both racism and white supremacy is as follows. A global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you feel that such a system exists, and do you...
No, not really. Not really. No, I think the world is much more complicated than that. There are lots of parts of the world that are heavily populated by non-white people who have their own systems, sometimes oppressive ones. There are a lot of liberal whites who deplore racism, trying to make a better world. There are also whites who are oppressive, not only against people of color, but people of other classes and so on. So I just can't go along with that. No. I do think it's an issue, though, and has to be exposed and dealt with wherever it crops up. But no, I don't think the world is organized that way.
Okay. So worldwide, you do not think that white people dominate non-white people?
Well, I mean, in many cases, there are places where whites are the dominant groups in various societies. It's more a historical, a vestige of historical development. But the world has obviously been changing enormously in the last half century since the removal of colonial bonds and empire and the emancipation of a lot of peoples and moves for independence, etc. So no, I just don't see it that way. I think as a historian, I see the world as a much more complicated place.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm clear, because you said no. So you're saying no, you do not think white people dominate non-white people worldwide?
Not in general, no. No, in the sense of dominate and seek to keep non-white people impoverished and unhealthy and so on. No, I don't see it that way.
Oh, okay. Wow, that is very interesting. Not the first time, but you
Hang
are
up
in the...
now, Gus?
Oh, no, not at all. That's just interesting to note. You, as I said, you're not the...
By the way, you asked me if I'm a white male. What are you, by the way?
I am a non-white male. I've been classified as black male.
Okay, fine.
But yeah, you're not the first person to come to the program who does not believe we're in a system of racism, white supremacy. But you are in the minority. Most of the white people who've been on this program has said that they do think we're in a system of racism, white supremacy, and that they do think that definition is accurate. But yeah, okay. You're not the first. That's my view too. That's all right.
Okay.
Because we do want to talk about the book, because I think there's a lot of important information, but that question is real important. My co-host, she is also a non-white female. She is all of 10 years old, and she, like me, believes we're in a system of racism, white supremacy. She also has some questions that she would like to ask about your work and just your views in general.
What's her name?
Her name is Justice. She is right on the line with us right now. If you have some questions you would like to ask Justice for Dr. Kevles, please go right ahead.
Go ahead. Hello?
Are you there, Justice? Oops. Uh-oh. That was my fault. I knocked her offline. My fault. She didn't do anything incorrect. Alrighty, we got you, Justice. Go right ahead.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you.
Yeah. Hello, Justice.
Why do white people keep information from non-white people?
Well, I didn't understand the question or hear it fully. Why do white people what?
Why do white people
Gus,
keep
could you repeat?
information? Why do
Gus,
white
I can't
people...
understand the question. Could you repeat it?
I'm doing it now.
If I heard it correctly, I believe her question was, why do white people withhold information from non-white people? I think that was what her question was.
Oh, I see. I didn't get to withhold. Well, I don't know that this is the case, but what do you have in mind specifically? I'm not aware of this. What kinds of information is withheld? Hello?
Can you say that one more time?
What kind of information is withheld? I'm not aware that there is a delivery, a policy.
I said keep.
Oh, keep. Sorry.
I can't, why is it that white people withhold or keep information from black people?
It was keep information.
I'm sorry, I'm just not getting what you're trying to say.
Why do white people, do you get that part piece? Keep
Yeah, I got that
information
part.
from
Why do white
non-white people. Keep information from non-white people.
You say, why do they keep information from non-white people?
Yes.
Well, yeah, I can't respond to the question because I don't know what information you're talking about. I need to know that. Because I'm not aware that white people keep information from black people as a general policy.
Any information in the world.
Well, I just don't know that that's the case without your, and I can't respond intelligently or sensibly without your telling me, giving me examples of what kind of information is withheld.
Racism information?
Pardon?
Racism information?
Well, that's kind of vague. What is racism information?
I'll just move on to the next question.
Okay.
Why do white people want racism, white supremacy here?
Here being in the United States? Is that what you mean by here? Anywhere.
Anywhere.
Well, as I was just telling Gus, I don't think that the world is marked in some systematic way by white people wanting to dominate black people. So while it's true that there are different groups, there are white supremacist groups in the United States, I think that they are very much in the minority, and most other whites absolutely condemn and deplore them. So why do the white supremacists think that those who are white supremacists, why do they think the way they do? And why do they behave the way they do? Because I don't really know, but to speculate, I think that they're probably very, very insecure in their own places in the world, and they think that black people are trying to take away what little they've got, and so they turn against black people for that reason. But that's just a speculation. I really don't know what's in their hearts and minds. But I'd stress that I believe that they are very much a minority in this country anyway. Hello?
Who do you know that practices racism, white supremacy better than you?
Who do I know what? And so, again, I'm having a hard time understanding your question. I just can't hear it well.
Who do you know that practices racism, white supremacy better than you?
Who do I know that something about racism and white supremacy, and then there's something else you said that I didn't get?
I'm saying it very, very loud.
Yeah, I know, but it may be
Who do you know that practices racism, white supremacy?
Oh, that practices, yeah.
Racism, white supremacy better than you.
Who do I know who practices white supremacy better than I practice white supremacy?
Better
Is that
than
the question?
You.
Is that the question? Is that the question?
No. Who do you know? So you, that practices racism, white supremacy better than you. So besides you, who do you know that practices racism, white supremacy better than you?
Well, I mean, I don't agree at all with. In fact, I'm rather astonished by the premise of the question, which is that I practice white supremacy. How do you know that?
Can you say that one more time?
What makes you think that? Just because I'm white?
Well, are you a racist white supremacist?
I'm really insulted by the question. It's not what I expected when I agreed to come on this program. It was to be charged with being a white supremacist. Why in the world do you raise that charge against me? You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. I doubt you've read my work. And so why in the world do you approach me with such a question? How would you feel, Justice, if I approached you with a question, since this is the first time I've ever encountered you in my life, and said, why are you a bully in the playground? Right? I don't know that you're a bully in the playground, but it's comparable to your telling me that I'm a white racist. Would you feel good if I said that to you?
No, because I'm not a racist. I can't.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, I'm not a racist either, and I don't see any point in your assuming that I am. Certainly no justification. I don't see any justification.
That's why
Well, I'll just say flatly, I'm not a white racist, and I'm really irritated that I have to deal with such a question on a program where I thought we were going to talk about eugenics. Gus, is this what you want me to be discussing?
I am trying. Huh?
I'm just asking Gus if this is what he wants me to be discussing. Did you know that she was going to ask me why I'm a white racist?
I did not. No.
Well, I think that this is a pointless conversation, Gus.
Well,
I'm sure you can appreciate that.
I actually don't think there's anything incorrect about her questions because, as I said, she and I have concluded that we are in a system of racism, white supremacy. So I think for both of us, there have to be white people who do practice racism. And I think she asked you if you are a racist, and you said no.
No, I'm not. So end of that subject, I hope.
Right. Moving on. If she has other questions, she can ask. And I definitely have questions about your work, because I do think eugenics is very important and related to racism, white supremacy, and I think that's in your book. But I want to see.
Although let's remember, it's a history book.
Well, and that's where we differ. I believe this is ongoing, and you don't think we're in a system of racism, white supremacy. So that's why it's important we keep that in mind as we move forward. Justice, do you have any further questions?
Yeah, Justice, what else do you want to ask me about?
No, not right now.
Okay. I generally don't interrupt Justice's questions, because I don't like people interrupting when I'm asking questions, so I try to give her the same respect that I would want. She asked, I believe her very first question was, you do not know, or to you, I'm paraphrasing, but I think you said that you are not aware of white people withholding information from black people. Is that true? Yeah,
I mean, it's a very, very vague question.
Are you talking about my question?
Yes, ma'am. I was saying that was your first question that you asked.
My first question.
Right.
My first question was, why do white people keep information from non-white people? Yeah, that's what I said.
Right. I think I just replaced the word keep with withhold or withheld, but same thing. And Dr. Kevles, you said that you, to your knowledge, you are not aware of white people keeping or withholding information from black people, correct?
That's correct, but I also said that it's hard to respond to the question without knowing what kind of information it's alleged is being kept from black people.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of information in the world. We're all drowning in it.
Yes, sir.
So what is it that's being withheld?
I really, it's hard for me to hear a white person who's a professor at an Ivy League institution answer truthfully that they are not aware of white people withholding information from black people. In this area of the world where white people, racist white supremacists, made laws that forbid black people from knowing how to read. That is a clear example of withholding.
So you're asking me about the contemporary world.
Hang on, wait a minute. Hang on. Number one, it wasn't me, because it wasn't my question. But number two, I wasn't even done. I mean, we can run the gambit of constructive information being withheld from black people, whether we're talking about just a few years ago when Hurricane Katrina struck. You had tons of black people who did not get needed life-saving information about what to do when that storm struck. You have tons of examples of black people not getting constructive information that they need, and white people being responsible for this. Even if you want to look at the 2000 presidential election or the 2004 presidential election, you have a lot of evidence that suggests black people did not get a right to vote because constructive information was withheld from them. It's hard for me to believe that you haven't heard of any of these examples, or that you don't believe these are examples where black people had constructive information withheld from them by white people.
Well, first of all, with regard to Katrina, I think that what we saw there was pervasive governmental incompetence that was not addressed only to black people, but to everybody who was living in New Orleans. Number one. Number two, I think that making it difficult for blacks to vote, and I agree with you that has occurred in recent elections, is not a form of withholding of information. It's a form of the denial of suffrage by a whole bunch of subterfuges. And if I was if Justice had asked me about those things, I would have said yes, of course, and then given some explanation for it. But to be asked about a general sense of pervasive withholding of information without knowing concretely what is meant, and also assuming that this is about the contemporary world rather than the history of denial of blacks being taught to read, et cetera, then that's why I responded the way I did. So there you have it. I mean, you have to be more precise, it seems to me, in questions like this about the denial of information. Because denying suffrage is not denying information, it's denying just the act of voting. But that's true. That's true.
What's true?
That's why I say you have to be concrete, because I don't know what that means.
Okay.
The general question.
Okay. I would say my view in terms of denying suffrage, denying black people the right to vote, I believe if accurate information was given to everyone who was going to vote, it would have been much more difficult to deny those black people the right to vote. If they had all of the necessary information, I think they would have been able to deal with whatever they encountered when they went to vote, and I think a lot of them would have been much more successful. I think a great part of how they were denied the vote was being denied accurate information.
I mean, you may be right. I'm not an expert on voting practices.
But I'm not done. I'm not done. Wait a minute. I'm not done. Yeah. I didn't interrupt you. I think her question was very general because I believe, and perhaps she does too, that this is a general practice in the system of white supremacy, which you don't believe exists currently, that racist white supremacists withhold information from non-white people. This is standard, routine practice. And the reason that I have you on the show, because it's my view, a lot of non-white people are very ill-informed, about eugenics and how this has a huge impact on their lives today. And they're just totally ignorant of it. So I think I suspect that's why she asked a very general question, because I think this is general, standard procedure in the system of white supremacy, which you don't believe exists.
Right, I don't. And I would say, for example, that it may be that withholding information from blacks about how you vote contributed to their difficulty and maybe impossibility they encountered in voting, but at the same time, when you have voting districts where there are inadequate number of voting machines or the registration systems are complicated, etc., that's not a withholding of information. That's an establishment of deliberate obstructionist measures to reduce the number of black people who vote. And so that's why I say, again, you have to be, in my view, more discriminating in what you're describing.
That might be. I don't want to get bogged down on that.
No, I don't either, because this is rather remote from eugenics.
Right, and we're about to turn the corner, but I do want to call out, I think, as with regards to voting, I think we both agree that some aspect of that general mistreatment and denial of suffrage, some aspect of that most likely involved withholding constructive information. And I did want to say with regards to Katrina, the same thing with the voting patterns. I'm sure some white people were mistreated and denied the right to vote, but my view with Katrina as well.
You mean not the right to vote, but you mean the right to save themselves?
I'm sorry?
In Katrina, the right to save themselves.
Oh, yes, sir. Right. I'm tying those two together and saying that I think white people were mistreated in both instances and being denied the right to vote and not getting life-saving information during Katrina. But I think both of those events disproportionately affected black, non-white.
That's probably true.
Okay.
That's probably true.
We're turning the corner to eugenics. Could you please, because I believe this is another thing that has been withheld from black people, non-white people, information about this. Could you please share with us, I guess, your definition of eugenics, what that term means, and how this way of thinking evolved in this particular area of the world?
Well, There is no unique definition of eugenics, and that's why I called my book about it In the Name of Eugenics, because all sorts of social causes were advanced in the name of eugenics. But in general, the idea of eugenics, which goes all the way back to Plato, by the way, it's not new in the 20th century, let alone the 21st. In general, the idea is that you would somehow manipulate the reproduction of human beings so as to improve the quality of the human race. Now, the idea, while panelizing through the centuries, nevertheless never got anywhere because no one had the slightest idea about how to accomplish it. Until in the later 19th century, when Darwin's theory of evolution came on the scene, people like Francis Galton, who was a cousin of Darwin's in England, had the idea that maybe man could take charge of his own evolution by controlling who mated with whom. He was much more concerned with what we call positive eugenics, that is, improving the quality by getting the good people to get together and have children. But he, too, of course, had no practical way to accomplish this, and so it was more of an ideal idea rather than a policy. But then after the turn of the 20th century, when the papers of Mendel, Gregor Mendel, the Austrian monk who discovered the basic laws of heredity, what we call genetics, were rediscovered circa 1900, then scientists began to think, well, we can know about what genes cause what traits in human beings, as well as, of course, in plants and animals. And so we can manipulate those genes in order to improve the race. Now, there was, again, some people had this idea of positive eugenics, getting the good people with good genes to get together and have children. But a growing number had the idea of what's called negative eugenics, and that is stopping the bad people with bad genes from getting together and having children. And that became far more the popular dominant mode of eugenics in the first third or so, or half of the 20th century. So the way people, am I going on too long for this, Gus, or do you want me to keep going?
Oh, I think this is excellent. I just was going to point out when you say positive eugenics and getting the good, quote unquote, obviously,
right,
good people.
Everything I'm saying in that regard is in quotes.
So, certainly. Getting the good people to reproduce. We're talking about white people?
Yeah, right. Okay. It's white people. Okay. But I should point out to you, Gus, that the doctrine of eugenics was undertaken not only in Britain and the United States and in continental Europe, but also everywhere else in the world. In Latin America, in subcontinental India, in Japan, in China, everywhere there was a eugenics movement. And many people of color were involved in it. They were enthusiasts of it. So it's not uniquely a white phenomenon, was not uniquely a white phenomenon, and doesn't remain uniquely a white phenomenon, I think, in the world, because the idea that you could manipulate people. Hello?
Yes, sir. Can you hear? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just heard something. I don't know what it was. The idea that you could manipulate people's genes so as to get the bad traits in people and multiply the good traits is not uniquely a white idea, nor does it have uniquely a white response. So the trouble with the early eugenics movement and its doctrine of negative eugenics, which, as I say, was a pervasive one, is that it lumped together things that are demonstrably genetic and people would like to get rid of with things that are not demonstrably genetic to our understanding, and people that are just simply social traits. So to illustrate, people noticed that there were genetic bases of certain terrible diseases, like Tay-Sachs disease among Jews, or cystic fibrosis, or among whites, or sickle cell anemia among people who live in Africa or in the northern Mediterranean regions. And the idea that you could then the eugenic measures were to try to encourage these people not to reproduce or to sterilize them. That was the worst of it. And the other traits, however, were social traits, prostitution, alcoholism, theft, criminality, etc. And these traits were identified, of course, disproportionately among lower income groups at least in America, in American society. Now, who were those lower income groups? Well, at the time they were they included African Americans, but the focus was not on African Americans for a reason I'll come to in a minute. The focus was on the recent immigrant groups from Eastern and Southern Europe, Polish people, Hungarians, etc., Italians. And they were focused on because they were people who were, living in the slums of cities and were disproportionately found guilty of criminality and robbery, prostitution, alcoholism, etc. So the early eugenics movement was pervaded by racism, but the racism was not only directed against African Americans, but also was directed in the main against the communities of immigrants from East and Southern Europe, who were at the time understood scientifically to be peoples of different races from white native or white native Europeans, from the European background. So the sterilization laws were, of course, very class biased, and people who were, sterilized, and you had to be sterilized the laws only reached you if you were in a state institution for the so-called feeble-minded. They were reached disproportionately to people of lower income groups of all kinds, including in the South what were called white trash, but also to these immigrant groups from Eastern and Southern Europe. So that was the dominant racism of the period. The one way that people were found to be genetically inadequate was how well they scored on IQ tests. Now, IQ tests were new in the early 20th century. They had been imported from Europe by various psychologists here, and they got their first. They were first used for identifying people who were mentally disabled. That is, they were used in colonies of the feeble-minded. But then they got their first big, large-scale trial during World War I, when the U.S. Army drafted 1.7 million men and had to figure out what tasks they were best suited for. A bunch of psychologists got together and started an agency in the Army that was designed by the use of IQ tests to help the Army sort out its men for the kind of jobs that they would do. And this provided a huge database on which to analyze the so-called intelligence of the American, at least male population. And that was done after the war, and people were analyzed in terms of, the scores were analyzed in terms of your ethnicity, whether you lived in the North or the South, whether you spoke English or not, et cetera, et cetera. And guess what? It came out that that these immigrants did much worse on these tests than whites from a Northern European background. And, of course, African Americans did even worse than the immigrants. And so this kind of data confirmed in a quantitative way the views of the early eugenicists that immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe were somehow genetically or biologically inadequate compared with others who were here from Northern Europe. And that undergirded the sterilization laws. Now, it should be pointed out that while as I've said, there was a huge amount of racism directed against these immigrant groups and against African Americans, that they also there was enormous class bias in the eugenic movement against people who were who could be white, but also were ill-educated, poor, and what have you. As I've said, poor white trash, as the eugenicists called them. Because there were eugenic movements and laws passed for sterilization in southern states where there were hardly any immigrants, and where African Americans were not the issue, because African Americans were very well regulated in southern society, as you know. The case that kind of proves this point I'm trying to make here is that in 1927, the United States Supreme Court ruled by a vote of 8-1 in favor of upholding the constitutionality of a eugenic sterilization law in the state of Virginia. The case is called Buck versus Bell. Bell was the superintendent of the Virginia colony for the feeble-minded that wanted to sterilize a young woman named Carrie Buck. She's the Buck in Buck v. Bell. And she had an illegitimate child, and as the result of that, she was found to be, on the face of it, feeble-minded. That is, because of her alleged immorality. Later research, by the way, by historians have shown that she was actually raped by the foster care, the son in a foster care home she was living in. But setting that aside, the court didn't know that at the time, but setting that aside, what the court had to do, or what the prosecutors had to do, was to prove that this alleged feeble-mindedness on Carrie Buck's part was hereditary. And so they gave her mother an IQ test, and she failed, of course. And then they gave her infant daughter, Vivian, an IQ test as well. Well, not really an IQ test. Obviously, Vivian couldn't take a standard IQ test, being 8 months old. But a nurse said, she had a kind of odd look about her, and declared that she was feeble-minded too. And as a result, evidence was presented that this feeble-mindedness afflicted Carrie's mother, Carrie herself, and her 8-month-old infant, Vivian. So it was found to be hereditary in the Buck line, and therefore worthy of upholding her sterilization.
Can I pause really quick in this, just to I want to get some more questions in, just kind of point out some of the information that you shared. But
anyway, the point I wanted to make was that Carrie Buck was white.
Oh yeah, that I wanted to pull that out specifically. The evidence, if you look at the people who were sterilized during this wave during the 20th century, there were a lot of people who were classified as white who were sterilized, correct?
Yeah, or immigrants as well. They were not classified as white at the same time, at that time.
Okay. Were more white people sterilized than black people?
Very few black people were sterilized, to our knowledge, and I'll tell you why I think this was the case. In order to be sterilized, you had to be, with maybe one state exception, it might have been North Carolina, you had to be in a state home for the feeble-minded. Otherwise, the law didn't reach you. And most blacks, of course, lived in the South at this time, and the provision of institutions of welfare, such as homes for the feeble-minded, did not provide for black feeble-minded people. So they were, by and large, not in these homes because these homes didn't exist for blacks, by and large. So the sterilization that were done in the South were largely of poor white, so-called poor white trash like Carrie Buck. rather than of African Americans. And by the way, there were African Americans who were advocates of eugenics. Some recent scholarship has begun to show that.
That doesn't surprise me very much. I know there's evidence I've seen where black people advocated for slavery too. So that doesn't surprise me very much at all under a system of white supremacy. I'm going to hold because I have some very important questions I want to ask just based on that. I have two, but I want to bow to guests that have called in because they have questions, and I want to see if Justice has any more questions. Justice, do you have some questions you would like to ask Dr. Daniel Kevles?
When white people mistreat non-white people, what are some of the things non-white people can say or do to get help?
So, can you repeat the question again? I have a hard time understanding what you're saying. You say when? Go over it slowly for me, Justice, if you don't mind.
Okay. When white people mistreat non-white people, what are some of the things non-white people can say or do to get help?
Well, again, this depends on the concrete case. You know, if a non-white person is being lynched by a bunch of white people, I think there's not a lot they can do. If they're being discriminated against in a job interview, then I think that they can appeal to the civil rights authorities whose job is to ensure equal treatment in job interviews. I think if they're being discriminated against in admission to colleges and universities, they can also appeal this to the government, but they can also tell reporters about this and write about it themselves so as to bring the light of public scrutiny upon these practices. So it depends on the circumstances and what exactly is happening and so on like that would determine what a non-white person who is being discriminated against or mistreated can do. But there are lots of different options that people can think about. But if you're threatened by a mob, which is kind of, I guess, the worst kind of mistreatment, unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do except plead for mercy or try to find some people in the mob or bystanders who are courageous enough to tell the mob to stop. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes. How do other white people practice racism, white supremacy every day?
How do they practice racism?
Yes.
I don't know. I think that some people practice racism out of fear. They see a black person on the street at night and are afraid that a white person sees a black person and is afraid that they might be robbed or something like that. I think that's a form of racism. I think that police can be racist in being, singling out people of color for heightened attention on the street or when they're in their cars, because they basically assume that it's a crime to drive while black, as people say. So there are all sorts of ways, but I think that a lot of it comes from fear and a legacy of thinking that I believe is beginning to has begun significantly to break up in recent years. For example, polls in the United States on attitudes towards intermarriage between, say, blacks and whites used to have it that most whites were opposed to this. I don't really know the position of blacks, so I suppose that they were opposed to it too. But in recent years, what we find in these polls is that people over 50 or so are still opposed to intermarriage, but people under 50 or so, or 45, don't see anything wrong with it. So it seems to me that American society, at least, and societies elsewhere around the world where you see a lot of intermarriage between blacks and whites, is changing in that regard, and white people and black people, at least of younger generations, are tending to see people of different colors much more just as human beings, different human beings, rather than a black person or an Asian person or a white person or what have you. So that's one of the reasons that I disagree that the world is dominated by white supremacy, because these changes are, I believe, happening. Hello?
Okay, hello? Did
I'm here.
Did you say that you don't think that there is racism, white supremacy here?
I'm sorry again. Did I say what?
Did you say that white supremacy does not exist in this world?
I said that I don't believe that the United States is dominated by white supremacists or a drive for white supremacy. I know that there are white supremacist groups in the United States. I know also that they are a very, very small minority and condemned by most other whites. That's what I said.
Okay.
Well,
I thought you just said that when white people dominate the world, because you said white people dominate something.
I said that there are some white supremacists here in the United States. I don't believe that they are. I believe they are a minority here. I also believe that white supremacy is not a goal or a fact in the world at large. It's much more complicated. There are white supremacists, but they don't control the world.
Okay. That'll be all for me.
Okay.
Okie dokie. We're going to go to the phone lines. Before we go to the phone line, I do want to point out it has been my observation a standard, refined racist tactic in the system of white supremacy, which our guest, Dr. Daniel Kevles, does not believe exists, is to cite the acceptance that white people now seem to have of interracial marriage as evidence that either racism, white supremacy no longer exists, or that things are improving dramatically. Anyone who is familiar with this program knows my view on sexual intercourse between white people and non-white people, and I could not disagree more. The fact that white people seem to, some of them, a significant number of them, seem to think that interracial marriage, quote unquote, is okay. I certainly do not think that means racism, white supremacy is on the wane. I definitely know white people who are admitted racists, who are in sexual relationships with non-white people, even married to non-white people, and they still practice racism, white supremacy. I feel that is one of the most dangerous ways that white people practice racism, white supremacy, by in any way, shape, or form thinking or even getting a non-white person to halfway think, if you see a white person in a sexual relationship with a non-white person, that white person isn't racist, and further, we're not in a system of racism, or at minimum, it's on the decline. Nothing could be further from the truth. You had white people on the plantation sleeping with non-white people, left and right, and you for sure did not think that was evidence that they were shutting the plantation down or ending slavery. So I just wanted to make sure I'm very clear on that. And as I said, that's really a really refined racist tactic that I see nowadays amongst white people, using this to evidence that racism, white supremacy doesn't exist, and I just don't think that's true at all.
May I just respond a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
Briefly. Number one, I invoke the changing attitudes towards interracial marriage as one indicator, not a conclusive proof of this, just one indicator. There are many other indicators you could point to, but while we're on that one indicator, let's keep separate whether blacks and whites are sleeping with each other from whether they're marrying with each other. I agree with you that the sexual exploitation on the plantations was horrendous, but that has nothing to do with attitudes towards, nothing to do with contemporary attitudes towards interracial marriage, which I say are vastly more liberal among younger people than they are among older people. And younger people are the harbingers of the future, because all us old people are going to be gone sooner than they are. Anyway, but the more important point is that that was just one indicator. If you look around at the number of people of color who are in the workplace who were not there before, who are institutions of higher education who were not there before, et cetera, et cetera. Those are many other indicators that, and also, by the way, in local, state, and federal government, in these offices, both elected and appointed, and in judgeships, all of these indicators taken together indicate that we live in a much less racist world than we used to. That's what I'm saying.
I could not disagree more.
I know you probably wouldn't.
Hang on. Particularly, they just had statistics, and we've had white people come on this program and show statistics where, we really want to get to the bottom line, since people bring up class, that in terms of finances, the gap between what white people have and what non-white people have is getting worse, not better. So if anything, I feel these quote-unquote indicators are further refinement of racism, white supremacy, to in any way suggest that racism is on the way out of here, we're having more marriages, things are getting better, when nothing could be further from the truth. And before we go to the phone lines, I would again point no further than the White House. President Obama facing a 400% increase in death threats. He has faced more death threats than any president in the history of the United States of America, and the only thing I can think this is attributable to is the fact that he is non-white. Now, that might not be, but I think that's most likely what it is. We're going to go.
I think you're right about that, but the point to pay attention to also is he got elected.
And he got elected because
with a lot of white votes.
Hang on.
With a lot of white votes.
He got elected, and we're going to the phone lines. If you want to call in to ask questions for Dr. Daniel Kevles, the number is 347-215-6071, and I agree wholeheartedly with Dr. Kevles. President Obama was elected because white people that I suspect are racist wanted him to be in the White House. If they did not want him to be there, President Obama would be doing whatever he was doing prior to winning last November. Phone lines 803, you are there. If you have a question for Dr. Kevles, you're on the air. 404, I saw you called in. If you want to ask a question, just call back in and I'll get you. But 803, you're on the air.
Gus, how you doing?
I'm well, sir. Thank you for calling in.
This is Thomas, and is it Dr. Kevles? I want to address you properly. Is it Dr. Kevles?
Yeah, whatever you want.
Okay.
Dr. Kevles is okay.
Okay. Very interesting conversation, and I don't want to drag this out, but first question, Justice asked about white people withholding or keeping information from non-white people. What about the Tuskegee experiment?
Oh, I agree with that. I agree. I couldn't agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more about the past.
Okay.
Okay. Right. I thought we were I was being asked about now, rather than about the past. You're absolutely right.
But that's not that far. I mean, we say the past, but it's our fairly recent past. We're talking about within the past 50 years, and this was very critical information that was being withheld from a non-white person as it relates to your work.
You're right.
Okay. Let's delve into something else. Let's go a little bit. Let's fast forward a little bit. Are you familiar with a gentleman by the name of David Baltimore?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Now, David Baltimore, okay, his relationship, and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't he part of, he's linked to David Rockefeller, correct?
He was the president of Rockefeller University.
Okay. Now, oddly enough,
about a year, for a short time in the early 90s.
Okay. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but David Rockefeller has, basically on many different occasions talked about the fact that, even with the advances in medical science and all the different things that have taken place in the past 100 years, that while it's helped, it's also hurt because he feels like we're an overpopulated planet. He's a person who feels like there are too many people on this planet. So isn't it odd that the dollars he uses for his endowment helps to fund certain experiments about population control?
Well, I don't know what experiments you're talking about. If you mean that David Rockefeller, I don't know his exact history in this area, but that people like him have been strong supporters of population control, that's true. But what does population control consist of?
Well, eugenics is linked to it, correct? I mean, wouldn't eugenics be linked to that?
A lot of people make that claim, but I don't believe that's true.
Explain why that would be true.
Population, if I can just tell you what I know briefly.
Okay.
When the population control movement started in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, a number of its members came from the eugenics movement. That's true. But by the time, however, of the mid to later 50s, there was really nothing significantly eugenic about population control. The idea was that it would be beneficial to third world countries or developing countries, whatever phrase you want to use, that people would be able, living in them, would be able to control for themselves the number of children that they had, because they would be better able to feed them, to educate them, and to launch them into the world, the working world, etc., if they could had more means per child to do that. The means that were promoted were not coercive. They were to provide, by and large, they were to provide clinics in these countries for education about contraception, birth control, and so on. And if the people who were in these countries wanted to use them, that was their choice. And by and large, a lot of people did want to use them because many women and men as well would rather have fewer children than more children. Or that is, if they were going to have more children, they wanted to be able to do so in control of their fertility rather than being subject to the vagaries of chance. So that's what population control came to mean. And while it had some origins in the eugenics movement, I think that for the last 50 years or so that it has really no eugenic intent or connotation.
Okay. Please indulge me a little bit, Gus, because I have a lot of questions here. So I just want to let's go back. We're going to go back to the past. Now, under the Nazi eugenics movement, it was a racially based keyword racially based, systematic, ethnic cleansing, and also considered to be racial hygiene. So, for instance, under the Nazi eugenic movement, what people don't understand is the fact that the reason the whole idea of Aryan, which Aryan was a misnomer because Aryan had to do with a language group, for the Indo-European languages. When you talk about Aryans being, basically Scandinavian, blonde hair, blue eyes. When you talk to the race aspect, the non-white people in question were people who were truly Semitic of either, coming from a region of near Africa, close to Africa, and those people were definitely non-white, who were actually Jewish in faith. Now, if you fast forward again back to what we're talking about in regards to eugenics, these countries that you talk about that are third world countries, would you classify those countries typically being non-white? And so that goes back to, for instance, are you familiar with the work of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing talking about racism and white supremacy, the need to basically make sure that you stifle the potential offspring of those who are non-white to increase the number of white people, or so basically because there's an imbalance in the number of white people who are in the world versus non-white people. I mean, doesn't that kind of support, the evidence kind of support that? I mean, basically what you're saying is they're giving money to basically...
Well, let me try to respond. Can I try to respond?
Yeah, I just want to make sure we make the connections, because all these things are definitely not tangential.
I want to try to clarify things a little bit. First of all, when the Nazis took over, there was already a eugenics movement in Germany. And for the first, and in 1934, the Nazis passed the eugenics sterilization law. They made the United States sterilization efforts look like, ridiculous, because whereas we had sterilized maybe 25,000 people by the mid-30s, the Nazis managed to sterilize several hundred thousand by the late 30s. That's number one. Number two, the original sterilization laws passed by and enforced by the Nazis were not racist. They had no racial content. They were basically about people who were prostitutes, criminals, people with genetic diseases, etc. And those were the people who were originally sterilized. When the Nazi eugenic movement became racist, after the Nuremberg laws in 1935, which worked a great deal of very cruel discrimination against Jews, and then the Nazis started to incorporate the Jews disproportionately in sterilization and ultimately euthanasia in the early 1940s, which is where the gas chambers were first used, and then, of course, the death camps. So that's point one. They were not initially. The Nazi laws were not initially racist, but they became so. Secondly, I would question the premise of your point by saying, your point that if racists support population control, that means, therefore, that population control is ipso facto racist. And I would say that's just a mistaken way of looking at things, because that means that if anybody whom you want to rightly disparage supports something you believe in, that what you believe in is therefore ipso facto wrong. Now, this makes the cause that you believe in vulnerable to whoever else might support it. So let me give you an illustration. In the 1930s, the Nazis, who were very concerned about the overall racial health of Germans, the German population, discovered that some of their scientists discovered that smoking is strongly connected to lung cancer. This was the first definitive or very strongly suggestive study in this area. So what the Nazis did was to establish public health rules about no smoking in the workplace, no smoking in the means of public transportation, and so on. Okay? And what they were trying to do is to make people less vulnerable, to discourage smoking and to make people less vulnerable to these awful diseases, mainly lung cancer. Now, nowadays, as you know, since the Surgeon General's report in 1964, we have warnings on cigarette packages. We have strong educational programs against trying to teach kids not to smoke, persuading not to smoke. We have laws against smoking in public places, in trolley cars, in subways, in buses, etc. So because the Nazis supported that in the 1930s, does that make these laws and regulations inherently Nazi? Well, of course it doesn't. They don't. I raised the point just to illustrate how extreme the kind of logic that does that kind of thing is. So the connection to the population control movement is to say that just because some people who support, or some groups who support population control are racist, doesn't mean that population control is in and of itself racist, or that most of the people who support it are racist. End of the point.
Okay. 803, everybody. The person who is most to blame for this is Dr. Kevles, not because he's white, but mostly because he agreed to stay with us for 75 minutes. If he was doing the full 2-hour show, then everybody would have more time to get their questions in, which is why I'd much rather have guests for 2 hours, because we generally have a lot to talk about. But I will get you a response, 803. Somebody called in at 111. You're next, 720. I'll get you after I get Justice. So the order is 111. You're on the air now. If you could ask your question, I'm going to Justice, and I'll get 720 last. So 111, go right ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Man, I really don't know how to phrase this in the form of a question. I know that's how you like to format the show. But I think one of the main factors for particularly African Americans to start getting a grasp on in regards to eugenics is exactly what goes down with genetics in the terms of creating color. Now, the guest that you have on your show, I don't know if you can answer this or not, but we know that there's a direct correlation between people consuming only the female species of an animal for a food source, or people consuming a mixture of the female species and male species for a food source. He knows that there's a direct correlation with that. And also that
correlation with what?
In regards to how it affects the physiology of human beings, as far as testosterone levels and estrogen levels. That's a whole other thing, but that's kind of the surface thing of the eugenics thing. But in regards to situations like Barack Obama, what black people have to get wrapped around their heads is that Barack Obama, even though he's half white and half black, may essentially, actually there's no may essentially, he is actually more black than African Americans in this country, where he's half black and half white. Now we have to get off of the color thing of thinking that just because we have brown skin that we're more black than somebody who is known, who's known that they are half white and half black. Now, because our skin is... Do you have a question,
sir? I'm sorry for interrupting. Do you have a question? Because we're running short on time.
Well, no, that was it. It was a long thing, but I guess just what is his response to that? I couldn't really complete the statement, but that's it.
Okay.
It's totally unknown to me what you're talking about. I just don't know.
Okay. 720. Oh, I'm sorry. I said Justice. If you have a question for Dr. Kevles, Justice, and then I'll get 720. That'll wrap it up.
How do you work to reduce justice?
How do I want to what justice?
How?
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Hello? Yeah. How do I want to something? I couldn't hear the end of the question.
How do you work to produce justice?
How do I work to produce justice?
Yes.
Well, I do it in lots of ways, I think. First of all, I try to lead a just life in my relationships with other people of all colors, religions, either sex, whatever. I try to teach that racism is wrong by examining it historically and discussing it in contemporary terms. I help to support organizations that seek justice across a broad spectrum of causes. And I think a lot about these issues. That's the best way I can summarize it.
Okay. How does the system of white supremacy harm non-white people directly and indirectly?
How does the system of white supremacy hurt non-white people directly and indirectly?
Yes.
Well, I think, again, I would dissent from the system of white supremacy, but insofar as racism and white supremacy operate in the world, I think that it damages non-white people directly by denying them adequate opportunity, education, health care, and a sense of dignity. And I also think it, from what I know historically from studies, that it tends indirectly to damage them by making them feel not good about themselves, which is kind of self-defeating for achieving or making use of what opportunities may be available to them. In a sense, both of those things, it seems to me, mutually reinforce each other, and they need to be fought and done away with to the best degree possible. Did that answer your question?
Yes. That'll be all for now.
Thank you.
Okay. 720. Did you have a question for Dr. Kevles? 720.
Yes. Can you hear me, victims?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I can.
I don't have any questions for your guest. I just wanted to say to you, victim, that when I turn on the show, and this has been for the last 3 or 4 shows, there are commercials playing, and the volume is, it seems, at 2 or 3 levels higher than your actual show, so it makes it difficult to hear the show, and I was concerned or curious as to whether you knew that or not, and if you did or didn't, maybe you could get in touch with someone to see why the commercials are playing.
I did not know that. Thank you for alerting me to that. I will get in touch with the white people in charge here and see if they can correct that problem. I think you all could also send an email, probably quicker than I, because my hands are kind of tied right now, service@blogtalkradio.com, I believe, is the email address. But yeah, if you send an email to them, they might be able to correct it immediately, hopefully. If not, I'll send one as soon as I can get my hands untied. There were 2 folks that called in. Dr. Kevles, do you have time for 2 calls?
I'll take 2 of them as long as the questions are short, Gus.
Okay, 843 and 909. You got a quick question for Dr. Kevles. 843, you're first up.
How are you doing?
I'm well. We can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. My question is this. In the current environment we have in the United States, it's pretty much apparent to me that there's never going to be a quote-unquote system that is going to be perceived as being equal, because number one, we're not going to, the population difference is just too broad. What is the remedy then to get what's the perception of equality? I'm trying to get a grasp on it, and what ownership do we as African Americans have in that remedy?
Well, I hate to say never, and you may be right, but my own instinct is to expect that we can always make things better, if not necessarily perfect. I confess that my attitude towards race relations in the United States is very informed by history. If you take a long view, we are a far more tolerant and integrated society than we were, say, 100 years ago, when things were pretty bad for African Americans, as well as for other people regarded as non-white, such as the Eastern Southern European immigrants. Does that mean that there's no more work to be done? No, it's not the case at all. There's a lot more work to be done. But and the kind of work to be done, is provided by the models in part from the past, civil rights movement, demonstrations, lobbying, moral calls for transformation and change and improvement, et cetera, and people trying to act decently with each other. Does that mean that these efforts will, which must continue, are going to fail? Well, as I say, I don't like to say never, but I think that what you have to do is have faith that because things are better now than they were, even though they're not perfect, far from it, that they will get better still with further effort of the kinds I've described, and innovative new ones that people will devise. So that's my view of it.
909, last caller, 909. Or we'll continue the program, so I guess after Dr. Kevles leaves, I can put everybody on and we can share your question or views. But 909, did you have a question for Dr. Kevles?
Yeah. Daniel, thanks for being on the show.
Very well.
Being that you come from Yale, I think that was important for you to come on the show, and so we could just thank you. I had a question. Is this the first time you heard the term non-white? Because you seem pretty comfortable using it. I have another question.
No, of course not. No.
That's not the first time you've heard that?
No.
Non-white?
No, of course not.
Of course not?
No, of course I've heard the phrase non-white many, many times.
Okay. Do you believe in the Darwin theory of evolution? And do you think that the IQ test is still used to sort men?
I think that, first of all, those are two dramatically different questions. I hope you understand. Yes, I do believe in Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection. End of point. On the second point about the use of IQ tests to sort out people, I think that they are, the way they were devised and developed during the First World War and in the 1920s, they were extremely biased by reason of education and culture. For example, the standard Army IQ test called the Alpha test for people who were literate in English had 8 questions. Some of the questions will be very familiar to anybody who's ever taken an IQ test. There were little mathematical problems or geometrical problems and what have you. But some of them were bizarre. For example, it said the such and such engine is used in A, the Ford or B, the Pierce Arrow or the Lozier, cars? And you couldn't answer that question without knowing something about cars. And
that is incredible, man.
Yeah, it is incredible. And it was on the basis of the answers to these kinds of questions, which were so culturally and educationally biased, that these determinations as to the mental qualities of different groups in American society were made. Well, they were ludicrous. But at the same time, I have to point out that the claims made on the basis of these things were rapidly denounced. Walter Lippmann, for example, who was the famous editor for the New Republic magazine, wrote a trenchant series of articles in that magazine in the early 1920s attacking them, the use of these results and their interpretation. And one of the major scientific proponents of them in the later 1920s, I forget his name right now, published a mea culpa, and he said, we were wrong. These are very, very biased. Then a white psychologist named Otto Kleinberg, who was then at Columbia in the 1930s, did a study of the results of the IQ tests as they were interpreted for African Americans. And here's what he discovered. He discovered that the issue was not race at all in how well people did on these tests, but whether they had access to reasonable primary and secondary educational opportunities. And he did this by comparing the performance on IQ tests of African Americans in the South, where of course the educational opportunities open to them were terrible, with the performance on IQ tests of African Americans in the North, taking into account how long they had been in the North. And guess what he found? He found that those in the North did better, much better than those in the South, and indeed did even better than the poor white trash in the South, who also had very limited educational opportunities, and that the performance on the IQ tests of the African Americans in the North increased in direct proportion to the amount of time that they had been in, their families had been in the North, which is to say the longer they were exposed to the better educational opportunities in northern schools, the better they did on the IQ test. So people came to recognize that these tests are very, very dependent upon cultural knowledge, cultural assimilation, cultural assumptions, and also upon the degree, the degree of educational opportunity that the test takers have had. Are they now useful for anything? Well, yes, in a very careful, limited sense, they're useful, because what you can assume is that the person who takes the test, say in 2010, January 2010, is capable of performing the kind of tasks called for, that are tested for in the test very well or not so well at that time. It says nothing about whether this is inherently in the character of the person, or whether it's in the person's race or ethnic background or what have you. All it does is say, can this person solve this following algebraic equation right now? If the person can do it, and obviously he can do it, he can solve that, but if he can't, then he can't. So that's what they're pretty much good for currently, and they really have no strong correlation with anything involving something you might want to call native intelligence, because people admit now nobody really knows what that is.
Again, Dr. Daniel Kevles, and I hope people got that. I know there is a tendency, non-white people, we've been deprived of education and information in the system of white supremacy. I hope people got that. Not really having a clear definition still of what intelligence, what that means, what that amounts to, how you measure that. That's real important, that a lot of very informed white people still have major discussions about this term and what it means. And then you consistently will see things like the bell curve and this sort of thing come out that say, well, black people are less intelligent than white people. As though, this is...
Bell curve is a terrible book.
As though this is the law, when every aspect of it is based on sheer folly, the notion of race. What are you talking about? How do you even determine these categories? And then, what is intelligence? What are you testing? Do you know what you're testing? Are you sure this is what you're supposed to be testing, or are you just evaluating how people take your examination? I hope people caught that. Very important. That's why I have to have my 2-hour show, because we don't have enough time to just do 75 minutes or what have you, because a lot of people still had questions. I didn't even get to ask all my questions. I wanted to ask about...
Well, I'm very sorry, Gus, but I've got classes to teach tomorrow, and I got to get ready for them.
Understood, but that's why I was saying I didn't even get to the Human Genome Project or feeble-mindedness. I thought that was really important, too. I did want to say, before you sign off, Dr. Kevles, perhaps we can have you back. You seem like a pretty informed person. Maybe we can get you back at some time. But I did want to say I find it incredible that you, very well-educated man, you're a professor at Yale, Ivy League institution. I find it incredible, number one, that you don't believe there's a system of white supremacy when the vast majority of the guests who've been on the program have said, obviously, this system exists. That's number one. But number two, I guess two things that I would highlight: pointing out the increase in favorability of intermarriage as...
Well, I said that was just one indication.
One indicator, right. One indicator out of all the indicators on the table that would suggest that racism is on the decline. The one that you pull is intermarriage. I find that fascinating for so many reasons, and I hope it again highlights why Cree and myself consistently point out sexual intercourse, because that seems to be at the core of all of this. That was his own indicator that he picked. Intermarriage.
Marriage is different from mere sexual intercourse.
I didn't say intercourse. I repeated what you said. Intermarriage between white people and non-white people, which is still, you're boiling it down, is sexual intercourse. So that's one. And number two, to say and be serious, population control not connected to race. That I found incredible. I almost wanted to say I do not think you're telling us the truth, because there have been guests and professors from across the country who've come on this very program and talked about how population control, population tailoring efforts have been carried out in a very racist manner, even up to current times, talking about sterilization programs in Puerto Rico and the way Depo-Provera has been used worldwide against non-white people specifically, whether you go and read, and I mean, I'm not an Ivy League student, professor, they wouldn't even let me on the campus, but I'm even informed of Dr. Kissinger and the Ford Foundation. These people have spoken, the Rockefellers, these people have spoken explicitly. There's tons of documentation that these people are talking very racist with their aims at population control, and a lot of this same way of thinking continues to play out amongst individuals who believe in controlling populations. They're not talking about controlling white populations. They're talking about controlling non-white populations of people that they have either implicitly or explicitly deemed to be inferior. And the evidence is overwhelming, even with Haiti and the way that birth control, as I said, Depo-Provera is distributed worldwide. So I wanted to make sure I said that before you left. I find that incredible.
Okay. You control the mic. It's your show. I think you're mistaken, but that's it.
I could be. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
We're going to take a commercial break. We'll be right back. We can get your thoughts, but yeah, I strongly suspect Professor Daniel Kevles practicing racism, white supremacy on the program. I could be incorrect. We'll take a commercial. We'll be right back.
I would say flatly you are incorrect, but that's...
Is racism hurting you? On issues of race, are you unable to speak, think, and act with clarity and confidence? Are you tired of laughing when nothing is funny, smiling when you are not happy, agreeing when you really disagree? At counterracism.com, you can learn specific strategies and techniques to counter the behaviors of the people who practice racism in all areas of activity, using words correctly, following counter-racist logic, even counter-racist science projects designed to reveal what racism is, how it works, and how to counter it. The open source code writing format allows you to pick and choose from a variety of counter-racist suggestions so you can produce the code that works for you. Stop by counterracism.com today and help replace racism with justice.
That's counter-racism.com.
Welcome to the desert of the real.
Peace, family. This is your brother, Hollop, a.k.a. Mr. Holipsis, a.k.a. the Buzz Killer. Tune in to Holipsism's Haven every Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we discuss the social, economic, and political issues of the day with a common-sense approach, an African-centered perspective, and a universal sensibility. Call-in number 347-843-4874. That's 347-843-4874. Check out related YouTube videos, blogs, and show archives. Visit www.holipsism.com. That's www.holipsism.com. I'm making it hard to get your Negro on. Hotep, Black Power.
There's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad.
The Cows context of white supremacy, Gus T Renegade, and Justice. He said it was an absurd charge. I feel his conduct was absurd sometimes. I mean, I was glad I had a mute button because I was stunned. I knew he was only going to be here for 75 minutes. He stayed a little longer, but I was just stunned, like hearing his responses to some of the questions, like even Justice's first question when he said, when the way he responded, like, what? White people keep information from black people? Like that never happens. Are you serious? I was just sitting here stunned. I don't want to interrupt Justice's questions, but I mean, I really was just like, are you serious? Like, I'm a victim of racism. I'm a black person. I've been thoroughly retarded and uninformed about many things in the system of white supremacy, but I can rattle off tons of examples where non-white people, black people, do not get constructive information at the time that they need it. And or are purposely deceived and given incorrect information. I can think of tons of incidents. And you're telling me you think this question is absurd? And you can even rewind him thinking, oh no, there's no system of white supremacy. You've written a whole book on eugenics. You can't talk about eugenics without talking about racism, white supremacy. I mean, you talk about the creme de la creme of racist white supremacists when you get into eugenics. You hit Madison Grant, Lothrop Stoddard, Adolf Hitler. You hit the white supremacists, the people who have busts and statues around the world in the pantheon of racism, and you don't think there's a system of white supremacy? Gosh, don't miss the importance of that. A white man citing an indicator that we don't have racism when intermarriage is going up. That is preposterous. Preposterous. We've had admitted racists on the show who are married to non-white people to cite this as an indicator that we don't have racism, white supremacy. Absurd. Absurd. I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. I'm changing the description of the program. Suspected racist white supremacist Dr. Daniel Kevles. And keep in mind, this is an Ivy League professor. Incredible. Justice, did you have thoughts on the guest today?
Yes. When I just felt that he was getting a little upset when I was asking him questions. Oh yeah, and don't let me share my email address.
Oh yeah, please do.
It's justice.asap@yahoo.com. Again, justice.asap@yahoo.com.
Okay. You felt he was getting upset when you were asking him questions?
Yes. Because
Like,
a lot of the white people that came on the cows, they were, they had this feeling like, I don't really want justice asking me questions. They felt very uncomfortable. Yeah, they felt very uncomfortable.
Do you think it's because non-white people are asking them questions, or is it because do you think it's because you're so young, or you think just they get uncomfortable with non-white people asking them questions about racism?
They feel uncomfortable when non-white people ask questions to them.
I have observed that. I think you are correct. I have observed a similar pattern with white people when asking them about racism. They do seem to be a little more uncomfortable, a little nervous. Definite change in behavior. I would tend to agree. Yeah. Did you have other thoughts on what he shared today, or anything else you observed?
No.
Okay. I'm going to open the phone lines up. If you want to call in, 347-215-6071. My hands are maybe I can get free. I can send an email about the commercials if they are still playing. But let's see. 803, your line's open. 720, your line is open. Yes, we can hear you. 843, your line is open. And 909, line is open.
Gus. That guy, he was absolutely, on a scale of utility, he was probably a rock. He wasn't even a stone. He wasn't even a wheel. He was on the evolutionary scale of utility. He was a rock. Just absolutely worthless. Absolutely waste of time. Absolute. I mean, he almost. I mean, it was to the point of, because he wasn't expecting that question. The reason I asked him that question about David Baltimore was for, and I wish I had more time to. I was going to use one of Justice's techniques, which I love, because he was trying to dodge the question, but we didn't have enough time. I was going to use Justice's technique, and the thing was, they tried to block his tenure at Yale because of his links to David Baltimore. Now, David Baltimore said he was over at Rockefeller University. Rockefeller University, funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, is huge in regards to, this guy talks openly about it and relishes in it. And the whole thing about the Rockefellers is that they have this whole notion of super capitalism and all these things that are basically white supremacy, and want people to kowtow to this whole notion of we need to control populations of non-white people, so that way there's more resource sources left for the white people who already consume an abundance of resources, even though they make up a small minority. And that was key. I didn't get a chance to get into that, but basically he was trying to refute it because there was truth in that, because it's very ironic that he has ties to someone who worked with for the Rockefellers are not going to fund you unless you basically subscribe to their cause. So
I believe their cause is racism, white supremacy. I think the overwhelming evidence would support that hands down. We do have time. The only time issue was Dr. Kevles himself, who was unwilling to do the full 2 hours. But I would like to get more information about Mr. Baltimore and his ties to Dr. Kevles. I just want to get anybody else that's on the line, get their views really quick, and then Mr. Thomas, if you would share that info, that would be great. And anybody else, 720-843-909. You're all on the air.
I have a question. I'm a little bit confused here. For those that are curious about it, I have been mistaken for being Caucasian on several occasions, and I want to let it be known right now that I am African American or black or whatever, Negro. I'm non-white, so I'll put it that way. But one of the things that's kind of confusing me here is the fact that, I understand the amount of time of slavery we spent in this country. I understand the amount of time of freedom we spent in this country. But I'm a little bit confused over if you say that there is a notion of white supremacy in this country, technically you're correct. But to say that, that is a grand conspiracy, I would have to, just be a little bit taken aback because I'm not quite understanding it. They don't have this issue over in countries like over in
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hang tight, 909. Hang tight, 909. Okay. I gotta compose myself here to get a codified response. Okay.
Oh, what I'm saying is this.
Hang on, please, sir. I will let you continue. Hang on, please, sir. I have the mute button. Everybody can be quiet. You can do it voluntarily, or I can mute. Hang on, please. It was funny. I found it hilarious that you stuttered, and it took you some time to think of the area of the world where they don't have this problem of racism, white supremacy. Because I was waiting. If you can name a spot on the globe where they don't have people being mistreated because they are dark, because they are not white, the cows can end today. Gus T Renegade will be no longer seeking a MacBook Pro. I will be seeking airfare to get me to wherever it is. They do not mistreat people because they are not white. I am not aware of any such spot on the planet where that is true. And I have seen, matter of fact, there are people from Great Britain who listen to this show who complain about how they're being mistreated because they're not white. So that is not accurate, what you just said. Now, wait a minute, because you said other things that are not accurate. Now, okay. I have never said the term a conspiracy. I've never said that on this program. In fact, we've had a lot of admitted racists on the show who have talked openly, publicly, about the system of racism, white supremacy. I don't say that we have a notion of white supremacy. Those were your exact words. What I have always said on this program is that there is a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. That's what I say every show. The overwhelming evidence would suggest that that's true. Now, I could be wrong. Now, if you don't think that's correct, the only question that I have for you is why are you listening to this show consistently, it seems?
Well, the reason I say that is because this, and I've not listened to you. This is the first time I've heard you. I've heard the other gentleman during the week. I've actually never listened to the show on the weekend. But there seems to be this group out there that is way more militant than what you are. And I may have confused you with them, and if I've done that, I apologize. But I'm of the mindset that any man can achieve. And And just like
why are you listening to this show if you don't think we are in a system dedicated to mistreating people who are not white? If you think everyone can achieve, why are you listening to this show?
Well, then I have every opportunity to turn it off and not patronize it. I mean,
right. So why are you listening?
In order to be well-rounded and have a good idea of what's going on in the world, you have to listen to diverse things. And I listen to conservative, I listen to progressive, I listen to the white racists, and I listen to those folks that believe that whites are of a system of supremacy. And so that way I'll know what's going on. I do not keep up with the mass media, the news that comes on, over the airwaves, because I definitely think that they have an agenda that is not within the best interest of quote-unquote black people, non-black people, and even those white people out there. So I find stuff to listen to and get different opinions because mine is not the only one in the world. And I believe that everyone's got an opinion, and they all stink. So, to other people. So that's why I'm listening to your show. If it's an offense, I'm sorry. I just offer my opinion, and I just
no. It's not an offense. It's just I try not to waste time because there are a lot of people who feel like there is no system of white supremacy, and I don't argue with those individuals because I don't want to try and convince you of something that's not true. I could be wrong, and if you're not having a problem, if white people do right by you, I don't want to waste your time. But I do want to cut to the chase and ask why you're listening to a show that is dedicated and exclusively focuses on a problem that you don't think exists. To me, that's not an efficient use of time, but maybe if you're not being victimized by racism, you have leisure time, right on. I'm going to check with the other folks on the line. If you have a question or comment, feel free, no problem. I guess 720 and 909, did you have any thoughts on today's program?
Greetings, Renegade.
Mr. 720, thank you for listening consistently.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I would love to say, hello, Justice. It's good to hear your voice again.
Hello.
I'm glad you're back.
Thanks.
Thank you. To the, is it 909?
I believe that was 843, sorry. 909 is here, but I believe that was 843 who was speaking, yes.
Oh, 843. I was just curious, are you the same person that had called in on an earlier show and said that you were married to a white woman?
No. I've never been married to a white woman. I've been married twice, and they've both been black women, so no.
Oh, okay.
To a white woman.
Okay. As far as your guest today, Renegade, I've been so intensely victimized this week, that I didn't have the energy. I just didn't have the
Understood. It was a bit surprising. It was a bit surprising to have someone write a whole book, very detailed book, on eugenics and racism, and some of the responses. It was quite a doozy. Yeah, quite a doozy.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, this is 909.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say, 720 said he didn't have the energy. The thing is, this guy is from Yale University. I mean, he's probably he's forgotten more things than we would ever know. Okay, so it was just great to have a Yale University professor come on the show and lie about everything.
Go ahead, go ahead. Tell the truth and shame the devil.
Shame the devil. that was great. That was great.
It was stunning. It was really stunning. I mean, I agree with Mr. Thomas, and I want to make sure we get his info on Mr. Baltimore. But I agree with him in that he didn't really give out a lot of information that I can use to improve my quality of life or solve problems. But he did provide an excellent illustration, in my view, of how racism, white supremacy is practiced, and what you can do to call that out. It helps if you have more information where you can pick out where they're saying things that are not true, like Mr. Thomas. But I mean, that was pretty embarrassing. I mean, for a Yale professor, he's not, just anybody, a Yale professor. He's written multiple books to come and just say things that, in my view, were just blatantly false. Just incredible. Just incredible.
He was doing his job. He was practicing. He was doing his job.
I mean, whoa. And underline his reference of marriage between non-whites and whites as an indicator that racism is on the decline. Please highlight, underline, boldface prints. That was boldface print. That was the indicator that he picked out, the evidence that racism is declining. I think that is huge, and why I focus and pick out sexual intercourse as so key on a consistent basis, because people that I suspect are racist, like Dr. Kevles, do things like that. Right.
And another thing, the first thing he mentioned when Justice asked him about what non-white people should do when they're getting mistreated, the first thing he said was, well, if you're being lynched, then, blah, blah, blah. I just little things like that are indicators. I mean, even though it was something small. And I think, too, that we have to get codified in asking our questions, because the answer is in the question. I mean, if he's going to disagree with it, who cares? That doesn't matter. We just want to hear what he has to say. The answer is going to be in the question. And once we get what he has to say, we don't have to argue about what we're trying to get him to agree with, what we're trying to say. Just let him answer. Say what you say. Let us hear it. That's it. Let him say what he has to say. And then we know if it's the truth or not. I mean, we didn't go to Yale University, but I mean, if it's obvious, if it's obvious, you feel me? If it's obvious, it's obvious. I'm thinking like Yale University. I mean, what kind of? I know he's intelligent. I know he's super intelligent, but it seems that the white supremacist attitude and the white supremacy is I guess that overlays education, common sense, just, well, anyway, I don't want to go on and on, but I just wanted to say that. It's common sense, common knowledge, and you have all this education, and white supremacy just tears all that down, it seems. So I just, wanted to say that. That was a great performance, and the information we got from it, the information we got is that he's in my book. I got my book. I got my races. He go on the races. He go on the racist white supremacist. a high level one, a Yale one. We got a Yale one, a Yale.
As I said, I will be changing the description of this program to Suspected White Supremacist Dr. Daniel Kevles.
Highly suspected.
Yeah, it will be modified post haste. Please, Mr. Thomas, can you please share? 646. I guess you're added to the call. We got you, 646. But Mr. Thomas, can you share the information about Mr. Baltimore, so we'll be all a little more informed about Dr. Kevles and his connections?
Okay, well, Dr. Kevles, he basically, they were trying. There was another doctor. There's someone who was at Yale who was trying to block him from getting his tenure because of his links to David Baltimore, who David Baltimore is. He's a biologist, and he studied immunology. And there was some among having ties to the Rockefellers. He also was involved in a situation with another doctor. I think Amanishi Kari. There's some fraudulent information in regards to recombinant DNA and AIDS. And so there was information that was basically reported in the papers that the U.S. government felt was flawed. So I mean, just the overall connections that this guy has to certain people. Like I said, he talks about the eugenics movement, but doesn't want to acknowledge the fact that there's a lot of this very work. Like I said, the Rockefellers helped to fund is in regards to population control, so-called AIDS research, probably how to spread the disease faster versus getting rid of it. So it's like it's mind-boggling. And like I said, I don't know if you noticed, he tried to parry the points I was making because he wasn't expecting that question. And when he did, he basically got back on his heels because he was basically trying to go these roundabout explanations, saying, well, basically using normal trickery that white supremacists will use about, well, just because something was Nazi in the past means something that happens now is a Nazi. Well, call it what you want to call it. It's all the same thing. So it was just very interesting. My head was hurting. I mean, I'm serious. My head was hurting. I mean, like, I was just like, oh my God, is he going to sit here? And he was just so smug about it. That's the thing about it. He was just absolutely smug about it. He knows that, this, I mean, the whole thing with what really obsessed me about the work like with the Rockefellers is that, they talk about population control, which is tied to eugenics, trying to control populations of non-white people, just to say, for instance, that, okay, there's supposedly, not enough resources for them, for the white people. And when that's one of the furthest things from the truth. So just very, I'm at a loss for words, Gus. I don't know.
Anybody, if you want to call, quick, 347-215-6071. If you want to call in real quick to hop on the line before the program finishes. I have a couple things I want to share. But yeah, it was. I felt it was fascinating. Even as I said, it started from the very beginning to Justice's question, something that simple: how do white people keep information from black people? I feel somebody's listening to something, little distortion, TV, I don't know, radio, computer. Thank you. Yeah, it started, as I said, with Justice's question, how do white people keep information from black people, and his response to that. And he tried to couch it in, well, it's too general. Obviously, yes, white people have withheld information from non-white people, but, she didn't ask about a specific incidence. And I mean, there are tons of them. I mean, you can ask that question in a very general way because this happens in a very general way all the time, where white people are withholding information. This happens every day, and I can't believe that he would even respond in that manner. It was just fascinating.
Well, here's the thing. When I mentioned this, well, okay, you got me. The ski experiment, okay, you got me. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, you got me. Oh man, gosh,
man.
He was withholding information when he was. That's what the first thing came to mind is you're withholding information. General, I don't really know you. You have to be more specific. Come on, man. You a professor at Yale. You can't connect the dots. It's a simple question, but he didn't answer because he was withholding information. He didn't want to offer. How do they say? You don't give up information unless you ask. Need to know basis type of. They say need to know. It's an only need to know basis, but whatever. But yeah, he he's withholding information right there, man. He's refined, man. He's definitely an elite white supremacist.
I would hold, well, just for my own personal code, I feel like Tim Wise, very refined racist. The people that I think are most refined, they're very skilled at being able to come amongst non-white people and fool those non-white people into thinking that, hey, I'm not racist. This Dr. Kevles, I was not really fooled. I did not think, really from the very beginning, I did not think, oh, this guy's working against racism. He's, might be helpful. Like from the very beginning, I was extraordinarily suspicious, just in the way he responded to Justice's first question. And as he continued to talk, my suspicion just continued to go up and up and up. So I would just say I think he's definitely a suspected white supremacist. Not very good at being able to function around non-white people. I don't know if maybe he's not around non-white people very often. Maybe he doesn't talk to non-white people who think about racism, white supremacy. But yeah, it was just stunning. That's really all I can say. There were so many times where I could have unmuted myself and just laughed. Because his responses were just unbelievable. It's like, I can't even believe you're saying this right now, that, white people don't withhold information from non-white people? Really? Like, marriage, intermarriage, that's your indicator that racism is out of here. Because we got a black person married to a white person. That's your indicator. Like, man, that's the best you got. Like at Yale, that's the best you got in your racist kit. Like, whew.
The reason why I said EG is because he's, like I said, he's a professor. He's basically a spokesperson for eugenics, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he said that's why I asked him about the IQ test, and he went on and on, but basically he's a proponent of that. He believes in Darwin's theory of evolution, which you know what I'm saying? So to me, he sounds like a proponent and a spokesperson for eugenics. That's what I got.
Yeah.
So he's in a high position, so that's what he's teaching. I can just imagine what he's teaching his students. He's a history professor, and I can just imagine what kind of history they're learning in his class,
Yeah, did 646, they jumped into the call. 646, did you have a question, comments about the program or anything racism related? Uh, 646, are you there? No, they might just be listening. No problem. Yeah, he was a real piece of work, and I'll even connect. I found out about Dr. Kevles. He's on Liam Sheff's website. Liam Sheff, I guess the people that they tuned in, he was on the program back in November. Really one of the only people to ever call and hang up on the program when asked if he thought there was a system of white supremacy. He refused to answer or he didn't answer the question, yes, no. He talked a lot about white people mistreating other white people, blah, 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 different groups, all that. Race is made up anyway, but he never said yes or no. And I just asked, can we clarify, get an answer before we move forward? The same thing that we did today. Dr. Kevles, no, I don't think that exists. Fine, move forward. He was unwilling to do that, hung up, wrote back and said, he posted the email in the show note. I said, I read the entire email on that program and posted it on the Facebook group immediately during the program. He said in his email that the agenda of this show was hatred of white people. But yeah, he had Dr. Kevles' book on his website and a lot of other information related to racism and eugenics. And thought Dr. Kevles would be interesting. He definitely was interesting, although I thought he might be a little more helpful. Definitely was interesting, though. Definitely interesting program. I did want to make sure I shared. I had programmed Dr. Welsing I got a message where she wanted to do a recording and that it was important. I thought she had something to share, and it turned out she just got the dates mixed up about when she was coming back on the program. She'll be back February 7th at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Pacific. She'll be back, but yeah, there was no urgent information, no nothing, false alarm. I'm glad and impressed so many people responded. There were even folks who were up at 5 a.m. For that show to listen in. So the anti-non-white team, we are perhaps a little more focused, showing some dedication. Also wanted to make sure I plugged Neely Fuller Jr. He was on Truthful Out's program on January 16th. If you look in her archives, it should be there. I think his name is listed in the description, but it's the January 16th program. Neely Fuller Jr. was on Truthful Out. Make sure you check that out, support her efforts. And he also, Mr. Fuller, he should be on tomorrow live on talktainmentradio.com. That address is TALKTAINMENT radio.com. It's at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific. He should be on tomorrow night. I'm not sure if they take questions or what have you from listeners. I think they do, but I'm not sure. I could be wrong. I haven't tuned in live before, so you have to just go check it out and see. But I think they take questions as well, so you should be able to catch Mr. Fuller tomorrow. I think it's every Monday, actually. I think it's every Monday, but every Monday, talktainmentradio.com, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Yeah, did anybody else have any comments? 646-909-720-803.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, another thing that came to mind, I was thinking, he's just too smart for us Negroes to really. That's something that came to my mind. Because it was like you said, it was kind of weird, but at the same time, when you were allowing questions to be asked and just how the conversation was going, I was just thinking like, wow, this dude is. That's just one of the things that came to mind. I was like, this dude, he's too smart for us. You know what I'm saying? I don't know why. I can't exactly explain it because, like you said, it was kind of obvious that what he was saying was not, what it was. But then, I don't know if it was the questions or just the conversation. It didn't seem like, I don't know if we were trying to trap him or call him out on what he was saying and not being able to really call him out because he was saying some like ridiculous stuff and I don't know if anybody. I just wanted to know for myself, about the non-white. He was like, of course I heard that. Now, I don't know. Like I said, you might be too smart for me. I might be I'm a victim. But to me, it just seemed like he was so comfortable in using that term non-white. And it's such a racist term. That's why I asked him, has he heard that before? Was that kind of, as far as what you understand, because from my understanding, I'm thinking that's something that the counter-racists came up with. So where would he hear that type of, where would he get that from? To be able to use it the way, I don't know if you called it or is it common? I'm not sure about that.
I was just gonna say I don't think it's as common as some of the other terms that you hear, like people of color. But I do hear even white people using the term non-white. I think I don't think Mr. Fuller or any of the non-white people victims of white supremacy, I don't think they coined the term. I think it had been used before. I know I've seen it in writings from like the early 20th century, racist writings, where they just, lumped all of the people who were not white into the non-white category and used the term non-white. So yeah, I have seen it. I do know that white people use it. He did seem comfortable with it. I think I talked to other white people who get very comfortable with that term too. Yeah, it doesn't. I think for some of them, it almost makes it simpler because they can just, it allows you to be very honest. You said it's a racist term. It allows you to just be very, very cut and dry, right to the case. White, non-white. It's real super efficient for talking about people. But yeah, that was just my thought. I don't know. Other people on the line, they can share their thoughts.
Yeah, I just thought it was a little interesting that he was so comfortable using it because it is, to me, it's clearly a racist term, and for him not to say, well, yeah, he was using it like he was used to it. And I just found that interesting. But I think it's an important term. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying for him to just not question it at all, especially since he said that he didn't believe in the system of racism, white supremacy. Yeah, he was very contradictory. Because even mentioning the institutions of when he was talking about getting help, when Justice asked him about how should non-whites seek to get help or something like that, and or abuse, when he was saying non-admittance to college, and he went on that. He went on about that. He said, you know what I'm talking about?
Say that last part one more time. Where he went to college?
Justice asked him something, I think, about abuse, and he was saying that not getting into college. He used that as one example.
Oh, okay. Oh, what to do to get help? There's a little distortion. Thank you. Yeah, I do recall that. But I think that was when she asked him about where to go for help if you're being mistreated, and he was listing the examples. I think is that the part? Okay, yeah.
Now everything he listed was a system. You know what I'm saying? It's a system of not getting a job, not getting into college, having to do with. He said something about the racist police. That's the justice system. You feel me? So all of these are systems where these things go on. So how could you not how could you not believe that there's a system of racist white supremacy? So yeah.
That I think that was I suspect strongly that was him practicing racism, white supremacy with the intent to deceive. And it seems like, at least with the people that called in, we were not deceived, thankfully. I definitely wanted to make sure I pointed out as well, because I think at least the people that called in seem to be pretty informed about several aspects of what Dr. Kevles was speaking about. In terms of, I'm just saying he said something that's just blatantly not true in terms of his assertion that population control now is not about racism. It's about giving people in the so-called third world areas the ability to control how many kids they have and regulate their family life a little better and blah, blah, blah. That's just blatantly not true. And if you want a quick start to getting information about that, you can check out the program when Dorothy Roberts was on the couch. She's a professor at Northwestern University, victim of racism, white supremacy. She believes there is a system of white supremacy. She was here in August, and she shared information about how Depo-Provera and other tools to tailor population have been taken around the world to non-white areas specifically. She has a lot of information about that. A lot of this is also in her book, Killing the Black Body. Dorothy Roberts, she talks about the history of eugenics, Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood, and she talks a lot about contemporary ways that population control, population tailoring is being carried out both here in the States and around the world. She talks about that. So just blatantly incorrect information that he said about that. And as I said, you can start right here with the cows, as well as the caller who phoned in about how they don't have these issues of racism in other areas. He finally named the UK. That's blatantly incorrect. We've even had white people from the UK on this program who believe there is a system of racism, white supremacy. So that was incorrect. I mean, just a lot of things that he said. I strongly suspect he was practicing racism. So I hope people caught that during the broadcast. And those are some places you can start to get information about where he was incorrect, where he said things that, in my view, are not true. And there's evidence to support that he was saying things that were not true. We might have a program tomorrow. Waiting to get confirmation from a guest. But yeah, might happen tomorrow. We'll have to see. Just check the broadcast. You can subscribe. That way you'll get an email notification. If it doesn't happen tomorrow, we definitely do have a show Tuesday night. I don't know if people were able to hear the program where we played White People to the Rescue. The video is in the description for the previous program. The singer and writer of that tune, White People to the Rescue, will be on the show Tuesday evening, The Oreo Experience. He has a blog by the same title. Blog is hilarious. The song is hilarious. It's pretty accurate about racism, white supremacy. She will be here Tuesday night. Late show. I'm a night owl, so I'm thrilled to have a late show. If you're on the East Coast, this is going to be super, super late. It's going to be, if you're on the East Coast, this show will be Wednesday morning at 1:30 a.m. If you're on the East Coast. Central Time, it'll be Wednesday at 12:30 a.m. 12:30 a.m. Wednesday morning. If you're on the West Coast, it'll just be 10:30 p.m. Tuesday night. But that's when the live broadcast. If you can't stay up that late, no problem. Just check the archives. But it should be interesting, informative, fascinating, and fun. This should be one of the first programs where I can say this show should be pretty fun if you have an understanding of racism, white supremacy. So Tuesday night, 10:30 p.m. Pacific time. If you're on the East Coast, that'll be Wednesday morning at 1:30 a.m. if you are awake. The cows will be going live. Make sure didn't miss any of the things I wanted to share. Those were all the major notes I wanted to get out for the program. Again, Mr. Fuller, he'll be on talktainmentradio.com Monday night. I think it's every Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And Dr. Welsing, that was an error over the weekend, but she is scheduled to be here February 7th. At 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Dr. Frances Cress-Welsing making her third visit to the cows. Does anybody have anything they wanted to share racism-related before we close the program out? I know 909, you're there, 646. Anything you wanted to share, comments, questions?
646. Hello?
Anybody? Yes, I can hear you. Anybody?
Oh. Well, I was going to, if 646 wanted to say, I kind of was talking a lot, but I guess not. Well, I will say this. Frances Cress-Welsing, she said that justice is a byproduct of self-respect and self-love. So I think that's important to understand. You know, we have to remember to respect ourselves and, you know, to the utmost. And I think we've seen a new tactic, really, just to be on the show, is to kind of be blatantly racist and say you're not racist, because it seemed to have thrown everybody for a loop. You know what I mean? I think it might be a new tactic to just confuse people. I mean, it seems like people are kind of bewildered by Mr. Kevles, you know, to say that he's not a racist, but then to be blatantly racist from start, from when you asked him about the system and, you know, did he agree with the definition? You know, that was I was gonna say that's too weird. That was too weird.
Yeah, that he was pretty ferocious in protesting and saying, you know, I'm offended that you would even ask if I'm a racist. When
right.
Justice asked him, are you a racist white supremacist? To take offense at that question even being asked, and I think that people made me work hard as a co-host on the show today. I think if I was a little more confused, more victimized, I can easily see how my conditioning to defend white people would have kicked in, and I would have went to attack the non-white person for asking if he's a racist. Like, how dare you ask him that question? I can't believe you would even ask a question like that. That instinct would have immediately kicked in, or I would have tried to soothe the white person. And when she asked, even when he gave his reaction, like, I just felt what's inaccurate about that question. I felt like the important thing was to highlight, well, we are in a system of white supremacy. At least Justice and I have concluded that. So got to be some white people practicing racism. You said you're white. I don't think there's anything incorrect or illogical about that question. I just hope people hear that. If I was a little more confused, a little bit more of a victim, or maybe even just not paying attention, just that him getting upset at that point and saying he was offended. He said he was offended that she would even ask that. My conditioning could have kicked in, and I would have rushed to soothe him, comfort him, play the Uncle Remus role, or I would have jumped all over the non-white person. So I would have fussed at Justice. How could you ask him that question? I can't believe it. Oh my gosh, that was totally rude. Da, 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 da. I would have done one of those two things, and I think that's a consistent. That's a consistent way that non-white people react to situations like that. So I hope that demonstration was constructive, and we can all hopefully be honest about that, because I think a lot of non-white people would probably have reacted in one of those two ways, attacking the non-white person or defending Dr. Kevles. Do you think what I just said is accurate? Carl, I guess you're at 909.
Right. I think that's accurate, and it's so. I don't know. I was gonna say it's so. I guess I just said use it beautiful, because when you understand, you go the opposite way. Because when I was listening to him, you know, say how offended he was, my thing was like, what do you mean you're offended? But I could see how, if you really don't know, you could kind of be like, oh, we're gonna lose the caller, but you know, we might lose the caller. Let's appease Mr. Yale or whatever. But your attitude was like, if we lose you, we lose you. I don't care. You know what I'm saying? And that's the difference I see in people that are, like you said, informed and you know, seasoned in their thoughts or whatever. It's like. Yeah, because I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, this dude's about to, you know, hang up. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But the way you handled it, you know, you did a good job, because you didn't appease him or try to, you know, correct anything. You just let it go. So that was good. And like you said, most people, non-whites, they would have been like, oh, you know. They would have went the opposite direction as you. So that was good. You did the right thing, and that's how I am. You know, that's my natural inclination, is to be like, is to be more, you know, stand my ground, because I know what I know now. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I'm still learning, man. I'm still, like, you know, other things that I do in my life, they come a lot easier, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm a totally different person dealing with these issues than I am in, you know, the other things that I do, and it's weird. It's weird to try to, because to try to get a mastery of this topic is not as easy as I thought. Because I guess it's because I'm not dealing with white people in this setting where you're trying to ask them questions. You don't really want to come out and say, you know, you're being racist right now. What you're saying doesn't make any sense. You know, hostile or whatever. See, in my regular life, I just either ignore them or, you feel me? My attitude is like, I already know what you're about. I can ignore you. I can make you feel real small, or I could ask you for things that I need, and I can get what I want from you, and you know, I deal with them on that level. And so it's interesting. Like I'm cutting dry with white people in my daily, you know, like I said, at work, and the non-white people at my job. They don't understand how I have the attitude, I take the stance that I take with them, which is no nonsense. I don't joke around with them. We don't talk about, you know, issues unless they're important issues. And then when I voice my opinion, when I voice my thoughts, you know what I'm saying, they're hard and they're to the point. But then I get taken to lunch by the white boss, and he buys me lunch, and I come back in the truck with him, and the non-white people are looking at me like, what is going on? They can't, it doesn't compute for them, and I'm in my mind, I'm like, this is the relationship. It's either me correcting you about something you saying that's racist in a way that is not all emotional, just straight to the point. And then if you want to, you know, if you offer anything, a little easier time, easier task, lunch, oh, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm with it. You know?
That makes sense.
Right. You know, that always been like that. I mean, shoot, there's a thin line. You know, that don't mean just because you bought me lunch and I'm about to listen to you say that the people in Africa are dumb for having babies, and they know that they're not going to be able to feed them, because that came up at my job. White man. Wow. Yeah, white man trying to tell me that the people in Africa are stupid for having babies and knowing that he can't feed them, and I had to correct them on that. I said the reason why that they having babies is because they having sex. And the reason why they can't feed them is because of racism, white supremacy.
What was the response to that?
He you know what his response was? You're not like the young people that, you know, black young people, you know what I'm saying? That was his response, is that you're not like, the way that you think and the way that you talk is not like the average young black male. Yep, and he conceded to what I said, and he had nothing else to say. Basically, agreed with me, and then from then on, it was trying to basically understand my thought process. I don't know why to refine his racism, but I never gave him the impression that he couldn't speak freely around me, but I wasn't going to let him get away with that. And so there it is. So now when he comes at me, and if it's a race issue or a social issue, it's more of a asking, what do I think about this, instead of telling me, you know, like white people try to do. They try to tell you, you know, why are they having babies in Africa and they know they can't feed? Like, That's just, I just don't understand that. I just don't understand that. Yeah, okay, well, let me explain it to you. It's racism, white supremacy. You know, that, you know, they have no concept of racism, white supremacy. So they're not going to stop having sex because this system is you know, it's natural for them to do that. You're married, then you have sex, and then you know you get pregnant. That's natural. What's not natural is people withholding food from them and taking their resources. That's not natural. So what do you expect them to do? You expect them to counter your racism and be unnatural in some way? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You need to stop doing what you're doing to cause the starvation over there. I'm telling you, Gus, when people start talking that white supremacy is not across the world, they man, come on. You can explain it to them very easily, man. India, China, that's what they try to say. India, China, they over there. Them white people is going crazy over there. You know what I'm saying? China too, and you know, I studied the Indian and how they're being, you know, the farmers are committing suicide because of those genetically modified seeds. You know about that?
Say that again, please.
Genetically modified seeds.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. The Terminator seeds and that sort of thing. I had some information. Mm-hmm,
right,
mm-hmm.
Those Indians out there, them Indians that's farming, they committing suicide 20 a day. They've been doing this for years now because they going out of business because Monsanto and these white corporations in there, sugar, the spices. Black people have no concept of what money is. Money is not the paper. Money is resources. They get rich off paprika. You know what I mean? White people, boy, they are, man, they something else. This is how they don't tell us nothing. We are simple, man. We are simple. That's why I think that thought came in my mind earlier that he's too smart for us, man, because we are simple. We don't understand nothing. And it's, you know, it's designed like that, but you got to think, man. Everything that you have is either an asset to them, and they're gonna use it to make money. That's it. I don't know.
Yeah, and I feel like white people in the system of white supremacy have access to a lot more information than non-white people, and are much more informed than non-white people. And most importantly, I think they are aware of that.
Yes.
And that's what I think. It makes it all the worse when individuals like Dr. Kevles, when they practice racism, and I strongly suspect he was practicing racism and not speaking honestly, or withholding information, giving out inaccurate information. It's all the worse because I mean, you just can't tell me. Dr. Kevles has written several books on this subject, eugenics. You can't tell me you're a professor at Yale and you write books on eugenics. You have a PhD and you don't know about racism, white supremacy as a global system. I mean, that's just embarrassing. That is totally embarrassing. We've had other Ivy League professors come here and share information. I believe Matthew Jacobson is also a professor at Yale. He was here. He agreed. System of White Supremacy, total system. You can't be white and not be racist. Shared a lot of helpful information. I just can't believe that Yale would allow a white person there who didn't have an understanding of racism, white supremacy. I don't think that would happen. Really a big part of racism, white supremacy. Learn a little bit about everything. That's a suggestion that Mr. Fuller has given. I think other non-white people, SenQ, learn something about everything. If you can get a little information about everything, that works against racism, white supremacy, and it will aid you in being able to pick out when racists are attempting to deceive you. The more information you have, you'll be much better equipped to deal with racist white supremacists. I think that was demonstrated today because Mr. Thomas, because he had some information about Dr. Kevles, helped him see through the deception. Just myself being a little bit, this was not the first time that I had studied eugenics or what have you, so this was not new to me. So knowing when he says, well, population control today, that doesn't have anything to do with racism. That's just them trying to, I mean, that's just absurd. So I would highly recommend try to learn something a little bit about everything as much as you possibly can. That's constructive. Learn something about it that will help big time. Because white people, they really have structured this system so that they get information and non-white people do not get information, which is why I felt Justice's question was excellent and cut right to the heart of the matter in terms of information being controlled, dominated by racist white supremacists in this system. So I would encourage you, learn as much as you can, and you just got to be on your toes when dealing with white people. You got to, unfortunately, expect that sort of thing and come up with your own strategy for how you're going to navigate dealing with a white person if they're trying to be deceptive or withhold information in dealing with you. And I hope people don't lose that point. I even think some non-white, including myself, that you could probably even catch Gus at a moment where he's not thinking clearly, not focused, where a white person could pull that emotional card. White people have come on this program and said that is a conscious tactic that they use in discussions on racism, where they will attempt to do something emotional or act like they're upset or offended or get defensive or they'll cry. Admitted racists have come on this program. Seriously, I can play the clip. I got my switchboard. I will play it right now, in fact, because I got it courtesy of the admitted white supremacist known as Jessica Pettit. I will play the clip so you all can hear exactly what I'm talking about before we ride out.
In your article, you said that conversations, you didn't use the term racism, I'm substituting, but conversations about racism, white supremacy, are designed to make white people feel safe and comfortable, and that is a form of practicing racism, white supremacy. Can you elaborate on that for our listeners, please?
Yes, I think that a lot of workshop culture, the first thing you do is you set up a safe space and like behavioral guidelines of what we're going to do in this space. So I do a lot of controversial things, and one of the things that I do, one, I don't ever get anybody's name. Like, I don't want to waste time in the room where pretending I'm going to remember anybody's name and from an hour from now. Mm-hmm. That makes white people very uncomfortable because they like to be able to say who they are and where they're coming from. We call it networking. So you network in the hallway. I got shit to do. The second thing is that you create these safe space rules. And what I think is really important is that safe space rules, so part of the Social Justice Training Institute does a very similar program, but I have had workshops where you divide up non-whites and whites, and you create your safe space rules. And inevitably what happens is non-whites might come up with 2 or 3 things. And the white group will come up with 164 things that they need in order to feel safe. But the reality of it is that nobody is going to bring a gun. No one is going to take your roof over your head. No one is going to take your food away. No one, what do you mean by safe? And when you really, as a white person, when I was really pushed around this, again, a kernel of truth that I was able to unfold is that part of my whiteness is that all of the rules are created for me, all of the maps were created for me, and I automatically get all updates. So I am used to not just knowing everything, but I don't even have to know that I know everything because the system was written for me. So if I'm going to partake in a conversation where I'm nervous about what's going to come up that I don't know, then I need to count all these things in place so that I can be prepared to make mistakes, no one will judge me, no one will make assumptions, and I can feel like I can hold on to that space on my porch. I also have been trained that as a woman with pretty big boobs, I can use my cleavage and my tears to manipulate almost any situation. So are we talking about getting out of a speeding ticket? Are we talking about getting the clock set on my VCR while my cable's being installed? Or are we talking about me having a genuine conversation about my racist actions, behaviors, inactions, and emotional realities?
The admitted white supremacist Jessica Pettit, speaking honestly about ways that white people manipulate conversations around racism so that, if they get pushed in a corner and feel uncomfortable, they already know they have things in place that they can do or say to get them out of that jam. And I think with Dr. Kevles today, I think one is to become offended. I think with females, as she just said, to cry. I've seen that a ton of times in discussions with white women in discussions on racism where they turn the tears on and it does exactly what we had said. The non-white people come out of the woodworks to beat down any black person who has said anything to make that white woman cry or feel bad. Farrell Winfrey, actually, she talked about that the first time she was on the Cows, that's one thing she tries to do is to never cry in discussions on racism, and that she tells other white people this. I have suggested this to white people too. Never cry in a discussion because it pretty much creates the same dynamic. The non-white people, we've just been trained to look after white people, and if we see them crying and such, we go, "Oh my gosh, Dr. Kevles, what can we do to make you feel better? Oh, you're not racist. Thanks for let's give him a hand," and it just ruins the discussion. You really got to train. I mean, really, you got to really train yourself to not do that, because I even at times still feel like, oh my gosh, we're upsetting the white person. Oh, and it's conditioning. It's part of the victimization to feel that way, and to feel like you got to rescue that non-white person to jump in to save them. I definitely do not feel like Dr. Daniel Kevles, professor at Yale, needs assistance or help from Gus T Renegade. If anything, I need help from him, and I didn't feel like he was being helpful to I felt like he was most likely, I suspect, practicing white supremacy. But I guess, I hope that demonstration was great. I said that, I think, on the last show, that sometimes this show, what we end up having is a live demonstration of racism, white supremacy being practiced, and I strongly suspect that's what we got today. So I hope you were able to learn something from a live demonstration of racism, white supremacy, in the form of being deceptive and inaccurate with information. I'm gonna end on that one. Mr. 909, do you have any comments, anything you want to say before we wrap the program up?
Yeah, real quick. There's it's called Independent Lens. It comes on PBS, and they have a documentary that I think people need to see. It's about it's in Mississippi, where they have a pageant, and they crown every year this pageant for one of their counties or whatever. And the county that they're in, the people the black people in the county, they are supposed to be the descendants from slaves that jumped off the ship and got free and settled in this part of that county. Now the white people, they are descendants from the man that went and got the slaves. Now slavery was over, but he's supposed to have made a bet with somebody to say that he could go and bring slaves back from Africa on the ship. He did this for a bet. Now when he got back to Mississippi, he went to go collect the money, and he told his first mate that if he's not back at a certain time, to burn the ship, burn the evidence. And so he didn't come back, and the first mate burned the ship. But the blacks, they got free somehow, and they settled in this land. it's a cold documentary. I don't like watching things like that. Like I told you before when we was talking about that one documentary, but I had some support. I wasn't watching it alone. So
what's the name of it again?
Man, I what is this thing called? I can't think of the name, man. That's what I was gonna reference it. I can't think of the name. It's on Independent Lens.
Okay.
Yeah, Independent Lens, and it's called Mixed Race Hair. That's the name of it.
Mixed Race Hair.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's incredible. But so they crown now the black people. They got upset that they were having this parade. It's like a Mardi Gras type situation. They throw beads and they throw these cakes and stuff. So they would come through town, and the black people would be there to see the parade. But the white people that were doing the parade, they never threw beads to the black people. So of course the black people wanted to have their own parade. So they ended up doing their parade. But the black people in this town, they want to be friends with the white people that's discriminating against them heavily. They're practicing white supremacy heavy. Like all the black people in this town, the white people own their property, and they won't sell. Like this one black guy, he said, they won't sell on their property. Yeah, they won't sell it. He said they'll lease it, but they won't sell it. So you got these blacks, man, living in these dilapidated houses, look like they just got off the boat. Like the shacks that they built when they first jumped off the ship, they still living in them after all this time. I mean, it's incredible. I couldn't believe the comments I was hearing from the black people. The black people went and tried to get these floats, and the black man told the white man, he said, "Yeah, 'cause we look up to y'all. We want to be like y'all." The white men that were building the floats. We want to be like y'all. And the white man was like, hold up, you don't be like me. You don't want to be like me. You know how hard it is? It costs $14,000 to build these things. You know how hard that is? Like talking to these black people like, yeah, you don't want the responsibility. You dang sure don't want to pay that $14,000, and you dang sure don't want the responsibility of having to build this thing. That's how he was talking to him. Man, it's awesome. It's awesome as an example of just, like you said, like you call it, domination, and at the end of the documentary, one of the richest men on the white side, he's talking, and at the very end, he said, "Now I'm gonna tell you something, but I won't allow you to record it." And that's how the documentary goes off. He said, "Now I'm gonna tell you something, but I won't allow you to record it." And the whole thing is about this dynamic between the two. And yes, everything that the white people have in that town is built on them black people. And what are those black people doing? They spending all their money trying to be like the white, trying to be fitting in with them. It's awesome. You got to see it, man.
Wow, I'm looking at the Independent Lens website right now, so hopefully I'll be able to track down Showtime if I can catch it. If I find Showtime and everything, I'll give it out when we come back for the Tuesday program, so listeners can check it out, and maybe we'll share some comments on it the next broadcast. But yeah, Independent Lens, PBS, they have a big website, lots of stuff, so just go there and check it out. He said he thinks it's mixed race hair. Go there, look for it, Google it, and if you can find it, we'll chat about it next program. Justice, again, her email address, justice.asap@yahoo.com. One more time, it's justice.asap@yahoo.com. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the program. We will be back, as I said, Tuesday night. Pacific time is 10:30 East Coast time. It'll actually be Wednesday morning at 1:30 a.m. The Oreo Experience live performance of White People to the Rescue should be a cracking show. Thank you, 909. Called in. Excellent commentary. Thank you. I hope the broadcast was of some value. Strongly suspect he practiced racism, but that's to be expected. We'll definitely be back Tuesday. Might have one tomorrow, so you got to check back, favorite the program. Please check back of the bus's blog, nonwhitealliance.wordpress.com. nonwhitealliance.wordpress.com. Also, make sure you check Cree's blog, cree7.wordpress.com, cree7.wordpress.com. We'll be back. Oh, yeah, my blog. That's right. Racism-notes.blogspot.com. One more time, it's racism-notes.blogspot.com. Justice and Gus T Renegade, we will be back maybe tomorrow morning, but definitely Tuesday evening, late Tuesday evening. Thank you for checking out the broadcast. We will be back. Context of white supremacy. Replace white supremacy with justice as soon as possible. Cows signing out. Thank you.